Hello, this is Idodmg and welcome back to the channel. In this last Epoch video, I want to talk to you about crafting. We're going to talk about how to use that forge to its fullest potential to give your build the absolute most power possible. The very first thing I want to point out about crafting is please don't be overwhelmed by it. We're going to break down everything there is to know about crafting using the forge in this video, and all the timestamps will be down below for your convenience. Crafting in Last Epoch is very important, and you can really mold the gear to fit your build. The very first thing you need to know about crafting and items in Last Epoch is every single item will have a certain amount of forging potential on it. In order to enter the forge in the game, you're just going to hit F on the keyboard by default. You can drag and drop your piece of gear over here to start crafting. You can see your forging potential right here. Forging potential is how much you can actually craft on that item. Once your forging potential reaches 0, you can no longer craft on that item. This is the reason that you don't want to craft too much on white and blue items. They have very low forging potential and are generally pretty hard to bring up to par with your yellow or rare items. Early on though, you could get a little bit extra damage by throwing a damage affix onto a blue item. Now this video is not going to be really about itemization and affix priority. This is going to be more about just utilizing the forge and all the tools that are at your disposal. Again, I recommend using the forge for yellow or rare items, but there are some standout situations where you may find a blue item that has 2 really good affixes on it that you could add more to bring it up to par, and maybe you're early on in your gearing adventure that this would really benefit you. Other than forging potential, another really important part of crafting is actually having the crafting materials. The crafting materials are really easy to get in Last Epoch. They're actually called Affix Shards. You can see everything you have in here. If you go to your inventory, you can click on View Materials. You can see I currently have 15,245 Affix Shards. You can search for all of them. You can filter by prefixes or suffixes, or you can show all of them. You can even search for certain affixes that you want. But the way that you get all of these Affix Shards is from monster drops. And also you can shatter items that you don't want to use that maybe have an affix that you do want to tack onto your other gear. You just go into your forge by hitting F, and you'll use that rune of shattering. It is important to note that whenever you go to any of the vendors, if you see any of these rune of shatterings, you're going to want to pick up until you have a nice stack of them. I usually go until I have at least 100 or 200 of these runes of shattering. Every single item in Last Epoch not only has forging potential, but it also has 4 affixes on it. It will have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. You can see on the item tooltip, the prefixes have the 2 dots on the left and the suffixes have the 2 dots on the right. You can also see when you drop an item on the ground that it's also indicated 2 dots on the left, 2 dots on the right. That is how many prefixes and suffixes are on that item. And if you don't like that, you can actually turn that off in the settings if you want to. However, I think it's an awesome feature of the game, and I remember it from way back early in the alpha from Kickstarter, I believe it was, where that was a really cool feature that they had in the game, and I love that they've carried it through the last 5 years and into the future. Once you have found an item that fits your build, and remember, when you're planning your build, you're going to want to not only factor in your main abilities tags to scale its damage, but you're also going to want to factor in defenses, and you're going to want to have layers. So not just resistance, but you're also going to want to have other layers such as armor, dodge, block, ward, endurance, life leech. Crit avoidance is another really important one as well. But once you found an item that you like that you want to actually craft on, I think I've crafted on all of my items that I currently have. All right, I went ahead and found an item that we could go ahead and talk about crafting with. And the other thing before we jump into the entire forge thing is I want to point out, you cannot craft on unique gear. However, you can use unique items to craft legendaries by running one of the endgame dungeons. You can take a unique item that has legendary potential on it, and you can smash it together with a purple or exalted item to actually craft a legendary. We're not going to go over that deep in this video. This video is focusing on the forge. So let's go ahead and take a look at these boots right here. These are exalted. You can see I have a tier 6 on here, so we cannot increase it. Tier 6 and Tier 7 cannot be crafted. Those are drop only. You can only craft up to a maximum of Tier 5. It is worth noting that the lower the tier is that you're going to be crafting, the less forging potential will be used. You can see for a Tier 1 strength will cost between 1 and 10 forging potential. Let's go ahead and hit it once, and it only used 2 forging potential. You can now see it could use between 1 and 12. So the forging potential cost goes up. Now, I have seen people playing this game and streaming the game that will come in here and they'll just hit that upgrade affix and they'll just spam that. Please don't do that. It really makes me cringe every time I see that. Unless, you know, if it's the only affix, maybe all the other affixes are maxed, or I mean, there's reasons you do that, but when you're starting to craft an item, you really don't want to. Instead, you want to kind of go 1 for 1. So we got a Tier 2 strength. Now we're going to get it up to a Tier 2 vitality. You can see it's less forging potential here. And that one actually didn't cost any forging potential because of my glyph. Let's go ahead and talk about glyphs real quick here. The very first glyph is Glyphs of Hope. And what glyphs do is they modify your crafting capabilities for that specific upgrade you're doing. Glyph of Hope will give that upgrade a 25% chance to have no forging potential cost. I always am using Glyphs of Hope all the time, and you're going to get so many of them that it really won't matter. Next is Glyph of Chaos. What Glyph of Chaos is going to do is it's going to take one affix and change it into another affix that can roll on that item. For example, let's say you get an item that has a bunch of fire resistance, but you're already way past fire resistance cap, so this one brings you even further past cap. You don't need that. So when you go to upgrade that affix, if you use a Glyph of Chaos, it could turn it into a resistance that you do need. This also has other applications. For example, on this item, I really don't want strength in these boots. I'm playing a rogue. I'd much rather have dexterity. So if we do a Glyph of Chaos, it will upgrade the tier to Tier 3 and it will re-roll it. Unfortunately, I did get attunement, not what I'm looking for. So I could go ahead and try again if I want and use more forging potential. But by doing that, I don't get the effect of Glyph of Hope. You can only use one type of glyph at a time. The next type of glyph you can use is called a Glyph of Order. And what this will do is it will basically lock the level of that roll. Glyph of Order can be a little bit confusing, but here's how it works. So on these boots, if you hold Alt on an item, you can see what tier it is and the range is on there as well. You can see on attunement, it has a range of 3 to 4. I'm at the bottom end of that range. I have 3. That's the bottom of that range. I would not want to use this Glyph of Order on this item, but I will for the sake of this video. So ideally, we'd want to use this if you're at the top of that range. So if it was the 4 attunement, we'd want to use it. But yeah, for the sake of the video, what we're going to do here. So when we did that, you can see the Tier 4 range for attunement is 5 to 6. So I stayed at the low end of that range. Again, you would want it to be at the high end of the range to use this glyph. This was just an example for this video to show you what this glyph does. Another glyph you can use is called Glyph of Despair. This glyph is wildly overpowered. And what this can do is it has a chance to actually seal an affix instead of upgrading it. And that affix then is on its very own slot, and you can add a new affix. So this is how you get 5 affixes on an item. You generally want to use this on a Tier 3 or Tier 4 affix, because if it's Tier 5, you can't use it because you can't actually do anything with a Tier 5. So it'd have to be a Tier 3 or Tier 4 to use it. The last glyph you can get is a Glyph of Insight. This is obtained by using one of the runes that we will talk a little bit later in this video. And what this glyph does is when you use it, it has a chance to change a prefix into an experimental affix. This is tied to your exiled mages and something that you're going to really dig more into later on in the game. So early on in crafting, this is not a super important part, but some of the experimental affixes are pretty good and build changing. Those are all the glyphs that you can use in crafting to really kind of hone your crafting capabilities. Again, my personal favorite, and I'm always using Glyph of Hope. I know we got a little bit complex and a little bit deep there talking about all these glyphs. Let's go ahead and take a step back, take a deep breath. Let's go ahead and talk about something else you should know about crafting. Let's go ahead and talk about runes. This is what this next area is going to be. You can see if you pick an affix, it'll bring it down here and highlight it, but you can actually change this by adding different runes in here to alter your crafting even more. You can see why crafting is so important in Last Epoch. There's so many different ways to utilize this function. The very first rune is Rune of Shattering. We already touched on that earlier in the video, and this is what you use to break down items to get Affix Shards from unused items. Again, you don't want to use this on every item you're not going to use, but if the item has affixes you do want, you'd go ahead and shatter it to get those Affix Shards. Next up, we have Rune of Refinement. What this will do is it will re-roll the values of all the affixes on an item within their tier. So you can go to your item, you can hold down Alt, and you can see the ranges. So if all the ranges on your item are really low and you want to try to increase all of them, you could use that rune refinement. However, you may not want to use it if you already have some of the higher range rolls on that item. There's also a rune removal. This is probably my second most used rune. Oftentimes I'll find an item that already has all 4 affix slots full, and maybe 1 or 2 of them is just useless to me. In that scenario, I will use a rune removal to try to get rid of one of those affixes, so then I could add on the one I want to. I don't know if this would be more utilized though over your Glyph of Chaos, because your Glyph of Chaos we covered in the video can change your affix as well as upgrading it. So it just kind of depends what kind of risk you want to take and how much of each of the materials you have. You can see I have a lot here because this has been all through early access pretty much. No, that's not true. I did a full account wipe one time just because I wanted to start completely fresh. Anyway, let's keep going here. Next rune is Rune of Discovery. This would be the rune you'd want to use early on while crafting on an item that has empty affix slots. What this will do is it'll add random tier 1 affixes to the empty affix slots on an item. The benefit of this is you have a chance to get some of the more rare affixes. You also have Rune of Shaping. This will re-roll all of the implicits on an item. What that means is these boots right here, the implicits would be your armor and movement speed. I could re-roll these to try to get a higher roll on them if I wanted to. It looks like I already rolled max on these boots, so I wouldn't want to use that rune on this item. You also have a Rune of Ascendance. Wow, I have 39 of these. I need to start using these a little bit more. Maybe I can get my Acid Flesh LP. Anyway, what a Rune of Ascendance is, it will turn an item into a unique or set item of that same item type. So as I mentioned, I'm hunting for an Acid Flesh right now that has a little bit of LP on it so I can craft a legendary that we talked about a little bit earlier in the video. So if I find a bow, I could throw it in here and I could use that Rune of Ascendance. Now there used to be a theory in the game, and I don't know if it's true or not, that if you use the actual type of item, so not just a bow, but a serpent bow, would give me a higher chance to give me an Acid Flesh. I don't know if that's true, but I still craft that way when I'm using ROAs anyway. Rune of Ascendance, just to, I don't know, make me feel better about using those kind of rare Rune of Ascendance. You also have a Rune of Creation, and what this will do is it will actually duplicate the item, but it will get rid of the forging potential on both items. You also have a Rune of Research, which is pretty awesome because if you find an experimental affix on an item, which you find from killing exiled mages, you can actually seal that affix onto its very own affix slot. And on top of it, you have a chance to get that Glyph of Insight that we talked about a little bit earlier in the video. I know I just threw a lot of information at you about crafting, but hopefully this video gave you some information and some knowledge with the crafting system in Last Epoch. It's a super important part of the game, and I wish you the best of luck with your crafting and forging potential and learning how to use all these glyphs and runes. Again, don't be afraid to experiment and try crafting your own way. That's honestly the fun in Last Epoch, is just tinkering with everything and learning and figuring out everything in the game, and crafting is just one of those. That's going to wrap it up for this Last Epoch video. If you found this video useful and or entertaining, don't forget that like button and subscribe to the channel for more action RPG videos. The best way to support me is through becoming a YouTube channel member today and or dropping a super thanks on the video. Your view alone means the absolute world. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.